Chapter 5. Jem Merlin. As the days passed, Mary Yellen settled down to life at Jamaica Inn with a sense of determination. It was clear that she could not leave her aunt to face the winter alone. She must make the best of the 6 months that lay ahead. If possible, she was determined to defeat her uncle and deliver him and his companions to the law. The events of that first Saturday night were never far from her mind, and the meaning of the rope's end hanging from the beam was clear. Mary had no doubt that the stranger had been killed by her uncle and another man, and his body buried somewhere on the moors. There was nothing to prove it, though, and in the light of day, the story seemed unlikely. 2 weeks went by, and there was no Saturday night like the first one. No one came to the inn. The future seemed very black at times, especially as Aunt Patience made little effort to be a close companion, and though now and again she took hold of Mary's hand, telling her how glad she was to have her in the house, most of the time the poor woman existed in a dream, going about her duties without thinking and rarely speaking. One morning, Mary decided to clean down the long stone passage that ran the full width of the back of the house. As she was doing this, she heard the sound of a horse in the yard, and a moment later, someone thundered on the closed door of the bar. No one had come near Jamaica Inn before, and this knock on the door was an unusual event. Mary wiped her hands and went into the bar. A man was sitting there, with a glass in his hand which he had calmly filled for himself. For a few minutes they considered each other in silence. Something about him was familiar, and Mary wondered where she had seen him before. The heavy eyes, the curve of his mouth, and the shape of his jaw, even the look which he gave her, were known to her and disliked. The sight of him examining her and drinking at the same time made her angry. "What do you think you're doing?" she said. "You haven't any right to walk in here and help yourself." The man finished his drink and held out his glass to be refilled. "Since when have they kept a bar girl at Jamaica Inn?" he asked her, and, feeling in his pocket for a pipe, he lit it, blowing a great cloud of smoke in her face. His manner angered Mary even more, and she leant forward and pulled the pipe out of his hand, throwing it behind her onto the floor, where it broke. "Is this how they train you to serve your customers? I don't think much of their choice. Fill up my glass. That's what you're here for, isn't it?" he said. "As you seem to know your way about here, you can fill your own glass. I'll tell Mr. Merlin you are in the bar, and he can serve you himself if he likes." "Oh, don't worry, Joss." "What's happened to his wife? Has he sent her away to make room for you? I call that unkind to the poor woman." "Do you want to speak to the landlord or not? I can't stand here all day. If you don't want to see him, and you have finished your drink, you can put your money on the table and leave." The man laughed. "Do you give orders to Joss in that way?" he said. "He must be a changed man if you do." "Joss Merlin is my uncle by marriage," she said. "My name is Mary Yellen, if that means anything to you. There's the door behind you. Good morning." She left the bar, meeting the landlord himself in the doorway. "Oh, it's you, Jem, is it? What do you want at Jamaica Inn?" He closed the door behind him, leaving Mary in the passage outside. She went back to her bucket of water. So, That was Jem Merlin, her uncle's younger brother. Of course, he had reminded her of her uncle all through the conversation, though she had not realised it. He had Joss Merlin's eyes, without the lines round them, and he had Joss Merlin's mouth, firm though, where the landlord's was weak. He was what Joss Merlin might have been 18 or 20 years ago, but smaller and neater. This Jem had the same cruelty in him as his brother. She could see it in the shape of his mouth. Aunt Patience had said he was the worst of the family. She was so busy that she did not hear the stones thrown at the window of the room, and it was not until one cracked the glass that, looking out of the window, she saw Jem Merlin standing in the yard beside his horse. Mary unlocked the heavy entrance door and went out. "What do you want now?" she asked him. "Forgive me if I was rude to you just now," he said. "Somehow, I didn't expect to see a woman at Jamaica Inn. Well, not a young girl like you. I know I deserve black looks for behaving as I did, but if you knew my brother as well as I do, you'd understand how I made the mistake. It looks strange, having a girl at Jamaica Inn. Why did you come here in the first place?" He looked serious now, and his likeness to Joss had gone for the moment. She wished he were not a Merlin. "I came here to be with my Aunt Patience," she said. "My mother died some weeks ago, and I have no other relative. I'll tell you one thing, Mr. Merlin. I am thankful my mother isn't alive to see her sister now." "You haven't a good opinion of the landlord, then?" "No, I have not," she replied. "He's turned my aunt from a laughing, happy woman into a miserable slave, and I'll never forgive him for that as long as I live. We Merlins have never been good to our women. I can remember my father beating my mother until she couldn't stand. She never left him, though. When he was hanged at Exeter, she never spoke a word for 3 months. Her hair went white with the shock. What she found to love in him, I can't say. He never asked for her after he'd been taken, and he left all his money to another woman on the other side of the river." Mary was silent. The lack of feeling in his voice shocked her. He spoke without shame or sorrow, and she supposed that he had been born, like the rest of his family, without any warmth or gentleness. "How long do you mean to stay at Jamaica Inn?" he asked suddenly. "There's not much company for you here." "I'm not going away unless I take my aunt with me. I'd never leave her alone after what I have seen." "What have you learnt in your short time? It's quiet enough here." Mary thought that he might be trying to make her talk. It was possible that her uncle had suggested that his brother should speak to her, hoping in this way to obtain information. "I helped my uncle in the bar one Saturday night, and I didn't care for the company he kept." "I don't suppose you did. The men who come to Jamaica Inn have never been taught manners. They spend too much time in prison." "What do you do for a living?" asked Mary with sudden interest, for he spoke better than his brother. "I'm a horse thief," he said cheerfully. "But there's not much money in it, really. My pockets are always empty." "Aren't you afraid of being caught?" said Mary. "Stealing is an awkward thing to prove. Suppose a horse wanders away and his owner goes to look for him. These moors are full of wild horses and cattle. It's not going to be easy to find his horse. Say the horse had long hair and one white foot and a diamond mark in his ear. Off goes the owner to Launceston Market with his eyes wide open. But he doesn't find his horse. It's there, of course, but its hair is cut short, its 4 feet are all the same colour, and the mark in its ear is a square, not a diamond. The owner doesn't look at it twice. That's simple enough, isn't it? Mary laughed in spite of herself. He was so open in his dishonesty that she could not be angry with him. Jem Merlin looked at her seriously, and then he bent towards her, first looking quickly over her head into the door beyond. "Look here," he said. "I'm serious now. You can forget all the nonsense I've told you. Jamaica Inn is no place for a girl, nor for any woman if it comes to that. Why don't you run away? I could put you on the road to Bodmin." Mary could almost have trusted him, but she could not forget that he was Jos Merlin's brother, and being that might deceive her. Time would show whose side he was on. "I don't need any help," she said. "I can look after myself." Jem threw his leg over his horse's back. "All right," he said. "I won't worry you. My house is the other side of Trewartha Marsh. I shall be there until the spring at least. Good day to you." And he was off, and away down the road before she had time to say a word in reply. Mary went slowly back into the house, and the cold, dead air of Jamaica Inn closed round her again.